Hi all, I have an amazing game of Mikhail Tal to show you from the 1956 USSR Championship. His opponent here was Vladimir Simagin. Now, Simagin was a very strong player. IM title in 1950, GM title in 1962. He was also the USSR Correspondence Champion in 1964. So here, Tal kicked off with e4, and we see initially what seems to be a Karakan, but after d4 we don't see d5, but we see d6, and quite often this is associated with fianchetto. But after knight c3, knight f6, what we get instead after f4, this would look like an Austrian attack against the Piets if g6 and bishop g7 a little bit, but we see an early queen b6 now. So pressure on b2 and d4, knight f3, and bishop g4. In some of Simagin's other contributions to opening theory, there's often a bishop g4 featured in some of his variations. He's got variation against the King's Indian and Simagin's defense as well. There's variations with this early bishop g4. So here it's putting pressure on d4 clearly. Bishop e2, because it's threatening to take that knight to put more pressure on the d4 square and pawn. Knight bd7. This seems slightly provocative now, knight bd7. We see e5, knight d5, and now Tal Castle's not worrying about his pawn structure here being doubled. Knight takes, b takes, and it looks after e6 as though what black is attempting to do is kind of create a good version of the French defense by getting rid of this bad bishop and then playing for d5 and having a kind of French defense pawn structure. Okay, Tal is not too concerned though. Knight g5, bishop takes e2, queen takes e2, and this is already a little bit dangerous, this position, because there's an imminent f5 here, and Simagin tries to kick the knight away from g5 in this position. Already it's uncomfortable because black can't do much, can't castle queenside without losing f7 there. He wants to kick that knight. Now the question is, what does Tal do in this position? Does he humbly retreat this knight? What does he do? If I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play in this position starting from now? Okay, well, it's Tal we're talking about, so knight takes f7. Knight sack kicks off things, opens up lines to the king. The king's going to be kicked about, surely, if it comes out. Can't castle, it's not a legal move to castle queenside, to run away, unfortunately. So we see king takes f7. And now we see f5. So threatening a double check after f takes, that would be a double check. Black here now plays d takes e5, and here it is a very interesting position for how to try and exploit black's king there on f7. Perhaps one of the absolute best moves is queen h5 check in this position. This move, queen h5 check, it seems to be extremely strong, because this kind of position is just very difficult to defend. Here, if we arrive here, this is very difficult to defend because the king could actually be stranded in the center with that knight being a liability. But that's the benefit of hindsight and computer power. This variation. So queen h5 is extremely dangerous. It shows how strong the position is. Tal played actually f takes e6 check, and this is still a very, very interesting way of attacking the king, especially after this next move here, which makes this whole thing work very well. Actually, this f takes e6, it works very well because of this next move. Now if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video, what would you play with white in this position? Okay, it's a brilliant move actually, rook b1. It is actually a brilliant move. Technically and everything, it's a brilliant move. Because, well, why? Well, If Tal had just gone in for the check, let's imagine he'd gone in for the check. This might just be pretty drawish. White would have to just try and settle for a perpetual check line. End of game. It would just be a draw by perpetual check. It is possible to draw like that, but he needs more firepower in this, and this provides it. If the queen goes back here, the queen actually took that rook. Now let's see if queen c7, bishop f4. This position is really dangerous, and if the queen goes actually to d8, it's kind of even worse. If the queen retreats to d8, this is like a mate in 13 technically, believe it or not, which runs a bit like this. The king is just, you can see the king's getting too exposed. This is it just leads to a false like mate. Yeah, so rook b1 provides some big challenges to black's position here. So if the queen retreats, we've got a nice pin there. If it goes to d8, in fact, it's a false mate. So the queen takes the rook, and we have a very, very interesting imbalance now. After the check, white is going to be winning this queen on b1 with a discovered check. So the king goes there. We have this discovered check hitting the queen. And for the moment, if you just looked materially at this position, the queen is against the two rooks. In theory, the two rooks can sometimes hold against the queen, and the rook is just against bishop and knight, and it's equal on pawns, but white's pawns are a bit damaged over here. But it's king safety, which is the key difference as well to factor in. And because of king safety, queen b3 is really horrible, winning a pawn here with this double attack, and the king is not having a nice time in this position. It's being kicked from pillar to post, is the expression, I think, which might be useful. So check, check. We have check here. Yeah, the king's really out and about now. Check. Now, this is a very interesting position, how to continue the checks here, because the knight's actually quite good in the center there. It's stopping queen f7. But there's an ingenious move played here, which makes things even more unpleasant for black. What would you play with white in this particular position? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Okay, g4 check, yeah. Trying to take the king away from the knight. Now, if knight takes e6, sorry, if knight takes g4, knight takes e6, we have queen e6 check, and then we take on e7, and things are just completely lost for black here. Black's actually going to get mated in this kind of position, or lose significant material. So yeah, so we have, after g4 check, a very difficult situation. King f6 is played. Now this pawn is helping the rook and queen here against the king. We have rook f1 check. Now Tal is doing this before the rooks have woken up. They're in their initial spots. So before these pieces wake up, the king is not left alone that much. Queen e6 check. Now here, by the way, you know, the king tucked itself in on h7. If bishop f6, it seems this looks absolutely crushing because of queen takes e5 with that pin as an example. So the king tucks itself in, losing that knight. It's not yet over though. Rook he8. Rook f7 threatening mate in 1 with queen takes g7. Check. So the rooks have started to wake up, but is it too late? King f2. Now we have a clever, resourceful move, bishop c5 check, trying to drag the queen away from that rook. And in fact, you know, to show it's not completely over yet, well, Tal played king g3. If he did play queen takes c5, king takes f7, this is not actually that easy to win this position with white. The two rooks do kind of help balance out against the queen. So some care is taken here, sorry, in this position, just to play king g3. We have, and it's an ingenious idea as well, king g3, because now white's king is potentially joining in the attack, believe it or not, this kind of route to g6 in some lines. We have check, and now king h4. It's incredible stuff, but if the white king is encouraged to go up the board, it may very well do that. If bishop e7 check, as long as the white king's not getting mated, king h5 is plausible in this position. For example, this line, yeah, it starts to be quite crushing, because then, for example, bishop f8, we have this, and then we're mating with the king and queen. So it's a bit scary that the king is actually coming in and can be an attacking resource here. So we see rook ae8, and now in this position, Tal actually here plays another great move in this particular position with the king on h4. And it's starting to get a little bit scary as well for the white king. But guess what he plays in this position, if I give you 5 seconds here. Okay, rook takes g7, check. It slightly weakens black's king. And yeah, we have the queen against the two rooks in this particular position with this double attack on a7 and c6. So white is now 2 pawns up as well, but he's going to get potentially another pawn now because of this double attack. If only the two rooks could weave a mating net for white's king. We have rook 8 to e6, which drops this a pawn, which means now that actually potentially this is a great passed pawn to start using. King g6, so this king is going nowhere, it's frozen there on h4, that's clear. But the queen's coming to the rescue, queen a8 with ideas like queen g8, king f6. And now the hero here is emerging, this a pawn, a4. It's going to overload the rooks in this position. King e5, we have a5. Now black's king wants to be an attacking piece pretty soon after king d5, either to help maybe over here, or is it going to be over here? It hasn't made up its mind. With king d5 it hasn't made up its mind, but it does now decide to come over this side, king e4, and now king f3, so it tries to help over here. So there are some attacking ideas for black here now emerging, like rook e2, you know, h2 will be mating potentially, or rook g6 for rook g4 or rook e4. But Tal's got this a pawn now, and he plays a7, and now rook e2, yes, with the idea that white's king is going to get mated. If Tal queened, that would be checkmate here. Just to show that on the board, if queening, rook takes h2, whoops, checkmate. But Tal doesn't do that, funny enough. He plays queen d3 check, and this is really annoying. We see rook 6 to e3, and guess what Tal plays in this position? Remember, there's rook takes h2 around the corner here if white's not careful. So that's a clue. So white to play. 5 seconds. Okay, he can actually give up his queen here, which he does. And that actually makes space for the king not to be mated. So black resigned here, because if king takes, it's not mate anymore because we've got the g3 square, so we can just queen in this position. And that's just winning. Yeah, or here there's no mate for it, we can just queen. That was an intriguing game actually, showing yeah, if you want to provide Tal with a potential knight sack, he may very well take it. It so happened, you know, Tal sometimes gets these really strong attacking positions initially and might not always play the most accurate move. If we just go back earlier, it's a fantastic attacking position, but his combination with Rook B1 makes this very dangerous and winning in any case. It just so happens, you know, Queen H5 check is also really strong as well under close inspection. But this is a fantastically fun continuation, which must have helped Tal get a great reputation. Games like this, absolutely beautiful. With the imbalances. The imbalances here are beautiful. The rook against bishop and knight, the queen against the two rooks. But it's the king's safety factor. The X factor there is the king's safety, which makes the big difference, how this king is just kicked around throughout much of the game. But then we have this phase where the white king is wandering in potentially. Then this rook takes g7 at this moment to win that bishop now in this position. Because things were starting to get tricky, so this simplifies and wins more material. Then the final phase is this a pawn. It has got a beautiful set of stages as well, this particular game, if we look at it in a nutshell. And the final rescue of white's king from imminent mate, using that a pawn as the final hero in the position. A beautiful game. I hope you will agree. Comments or questions on YouTube? Thanks very much.